Hi, everyone. This is Maheen, and welcome to the Canadian SME Small Business Podcast. Today, we are exploring the critical intersection of data science and supply chain management. In 2026, the brands that win aren't the ones with the largest warehouses, but the ones with the smartest, most predictive planning systems. Joining us is Jasneet, the co founder of TrueGradient, with deep expertise from and experience from industry giants like Amazon and Walmart. Jasneet is bringing enterprise grade AI modeling to the mid market. They are on a mission to democratize supply chain excellence, helping modern brands optimize everything from inventory to pricing in real time. There's lots to uncover, so without a further ado, let's welcome and dive in. Jesse, it's a pleasure to have you on the show with us. Thank you for joining. How are you?
Well, thank you, Maheen. Appreciate this podcast and thank you for having me. Looking
Of
forward.
course. Very excited and pleased to have you join us here, Jasneet. Let's open a discussion by understanding the origin story.
hmm
You've led planning and logistics at massive organizations, but you chose to leave that behind to build True Gradient. Please tell us what inspired the creation of True Gradient for mid-market supply chains.
Absolutely. That's a great question. There is a small story behind that. A few years ago, a close friend of mine, someone who had built a really successful e-commerce brand, doing close to 100 million in revenue, reached out to me. And on the outside, everything looked amazing, fast growth, strong brand, great traction. But when we spoke, he said something that sort of stuck with me is like, I'm constantly stuck between having too much inventory or losing sales. I just don't have the clarity, right? There's a lot of chaos. And he was at that time actively looking for an advanced planning solution. But the tools, basically the tools for mid-market or smaller companies, whatever he was able to review were sort of glorified spreadsheets, if you will, right? They couldn't handle the complexity he was dealing with. And the enterprise systems, they were too expensive or frankly overkill for a company like his. So at that time, I was consulting large enterprises like Estee Lauder, Gap, Sobeys, etc., and solving very similar problems, but at a different scale, right? So, but I realized I couldn't help him, and it made me sort of step back and see a much wider, bigger gap. That is what mid-market brands, which are actually some of them are most dynamic and fast-growing businesses, they were completely underserved, right? And they were stuck sort of in the middle. And they actually had real complexity, multiple channels, promotions, changing demand, and were still making critical supply chain decisions on Excel with fragmented data and a lot of guesswork, right? And around that time when I was thinking about it, it was a good problem to solve. I also met my super talented former colleague Ankur Verma along with Namrata and Sid, who were based out of India, and they also identified the same problem, right? And they had already started building something out and had early customers in India, and are thinking, 2 years back, two and a half sort of aligned instantly, not only on the problem, but on the belief that this space needed fundamentally a different approach. And yeah, that's where when it all crystallized for us, and we realized the problem isn't forecasting, the problem is decision making. So we built True Gradient, which is an AI native planning operating system, which does not only predict demand, but actually connects demand, pricing, and inventory decisions, and help businesses make better decisions. So
Mhm.
yeah, so here we are, and still really focused on our mission, and yeah, so that's the sort of the origin story.
That is amazing. Thank you for sharing such great inspiration and motivation to do this. And it's clear that identifying these deep operational gaps firsthand was a perfect catalyst for creating a new standard, Jasneet. Now let's
hmm
explore why fragmented tools and spreadsheets are limiting modern supply chain management. Um,
Yeah,
Jasneet, why do spreadsheets fail modern retailers managing global supply chains?
yeah. No, that's again a question which we often businesses ask, and so spreadsheets fails because honestly world is non-linear and supply chain planning is interconnected, right?
Mhm.
Modern retailers, consumer brands, they are operating in a completely different, highly complex environment today. Multiple sales channels, like I said, Shopify, Amazon, retail, global suppliers, right? constantly changing demand driven by promotion, seasonality, social trends. And spreadsheets were not designed for that level of complexity, right? They are static, while supply chains are dynamic. They are manual, while decisions needs to happen real time. And importantly, I always say that it interconnected, right? The spreadsheets would typically, operate in silos. What ends up happening is, your demand time sits in one sheet, inventory in another, pricing in another, right? So one single connected view of business is super important. And if it is not connected, that's where the real problems start to begin. Because again, supply chains are interconnected. A pricing change can impact demand. If you lower your prices, you're going to get a lift in demand, right? And if demand is increasing, you need to position your inventory well to meet that demand, which impacts service level. So those things can't be modeled in a sort of a spreadsheet, right? So and what happens in spreadsheets is typically teams spend more time reconciling data than actually making decisions. So as business scale, the cost of that becomes very real. Excess inventory, stock out. So that's why spreadsheet actually eventually breaks, not technically but operationally. They simply can't keep up with the speed, if you will, speed, scale, and interconnected nature of modern supply chains. So yeah, so that is is key.
Right. Now, moving beyond spreadsheets is the only way that we understand just need to modernize our operations and really stop bleeding capital. Um,
Yeah.
Next up, let's discuss how AI acts as a force multiplier in optimizing supply chain operations. Justine, how does AI expand the capacity of small teams to manage supply chains?
Yep, yep. Very relevant for small teams in particular because AI is a force multiplier, really, about amplifying human decisions, not replacing it. Let me be clear, right? In supply chains, planners are constantly juggling hundreds of decisions: what to stock, where to allocate, where to reorder, how to price. So, challenge obviously isn't lack of data, it's the sheer volume and complexity of decisions. This is where AI does compress that complexity. It can again analyze millions of demand signals, simulate thousands of scenarios, surface the few decisions that actually matter, right? So instead of a planner spending hours building forecasts, reconciling spreadsheets, they can focus on what action to take. That is the multiplier effect, right? But the real shift is, yeah, AI moves teams from reactive to proactive. So instead of sort of asking what happened, you start asking what should I do next, right? So that's where the real value comes in, and not just better analysis, but better decisions at scale,
Hmm. That's a
right?
well laid out response, actually, and it tells us that using AI to boost service levels while simultaneously minimizing costs is quite a massive competitive advantage. And to the founders and the OPS leaders that are watching in 2026, if you are planning your inventory based on a gut feel or maybe last year's spreadsheet, you're
Yeah,
actively losing market share to competitors using predictive AI. So please, if you want to scale, you have to really trade your manual processes for intelligent systems, or you will forever be in that loop of being limited by your own administrative capacity. So thank you for highlighting that, Jasneet. Now let's look at
mm,
how businesses can shift from reactive planning to intelligent orchestration. What planning capabilities must brands adopt to stay competitive today?
absolutely. So to stay competitive today, brands and retailers need to fundamentally rethink how they plan, right? Because the old siloed approach just doesn't work anymore, right? So I think there are few capabilities which are absolutely critical, right? The first is connected planning, right? Demand, inventory, pricing can't operate in isolation. A pricing decision, like I said, impacts in demand and which impacts inventory. So everything needs to work as one system, right? Uh, and like you said, right, people who are not adopting this, they'll fall behind, and it's a very suboptimal way of operating in silos. So, and second is real-time visibility and responsiveness. Demand is changing faster than ever, right? So planning can't be a monthly exercise; it has to be a continuous exercise. Scenario simulation, the third one. The best operators aren't just reacting; they are constantly asking, "What if? What if demand spike? What if supply is delayed? What if we change price?" So being able to simulate and compare outcomes is a huge advantage, right? And And finally, execution alignment, right? You can do all the planning, is only valuable if it translates to action, right? So the system needs to connect directly to operations as well. And like you sort of articulated beautifully, right? At the end of the day, the winners are the ones who can make faster, more connected, and more confident decisions at scale, right? So
Right.
yeah, yeah,
No, that is 100% right. How the modern planning capabilities work is that precision at the granular level is pretty much
yeah.
non-negotiable for companies that really want to thrive in today's volatile climate. Finally, Justine, let's examine how TrueGradient's new innovations are shaping the next phase of growth. Tell us,
Yeah.
how will the mobile version of TrueGradient change supply chain workflows?
Very excited about this capability, Maheen, right? Because the mobile version of TrueGradient, shorter version of TrueGradient TG, fundamentally changes where and how supply chain decisions get made, right? So traditionally, again, planning has been a sort of a desk-bound activity because you sit in front of the dashboards, spreadsheets, and represent decisions happens in cycles. Now, mobile version flips that completely, right? For the new generation of planners as well. Now, decision can happen in the flow of business, right? Whether you are in a meeting, on the shop floor, or even traveling, flight, you're no longer waiting to get back to your system to react or act. I think the comes along with it is the big shift of speed, right? Instead of digging, through the data, the system, the agents, the new age agents are able to surface what matters. You're about to stock out here. You have excess here. This product needs a markdown. So lets you act instantly, right? So, and then third, it becomes more collaborative. So supply chain decisions don't just sit with planners anymore. Founders, operators, even finance teams can engage with the same insights in real time.
Right.
And, I think I would finally say that is far more intuitive and conversational, or at least the potential of it, the present capabilities as well, but the future is even more exciting because you can ask simple questions, right? It is becoming conversational. This is where agentic AI, large language models, comes into play, right? This is an exciting present capability, like let's say, which is becoming stronger day by day. So true gradient agents can sort of act as a co-pilot to the planner, not only showing the data but helping you decide what to do next. The system sort of continuously guides you towards the highest impact decisions. So again, the
Mhm.
real impact is planning moves from being periodic and reactive to continuous, accessible, and action driven, literally in your pocket.
That is right. I mean, bringing enterprise grade intelligence to the palm of your
Yeah,
hand is going to change the game for the retail planners everywhere, Jasneet. So thank you for
yeah.
highlighting that feature. And that shift towards mobile agility is quite the perfect place to kind of wrap up our discussion today.
Mhm.
Jasneet, what advice would you help would help founders that are struggling with inventory planning?
Brilliant question, Mahi. Thank you for asking that. So, the biggest advice I would give founders, CEOs, or chief operating officer, that matter, struggling with inventory planning is this, right? So, don't treat it as an operational problem. It is actually a decision-making problem, right? And most founders or leaders really either over-index on intuition, which leads to stockouts, or overcorrect with buffers, right, which leads to excess inventory. So both sort of one ties up cash, another is slow growth, right? So I think
Mhm.
the first basic step is visibility. Know what's actually driving your inventory, which products are creating most of your revenue, where are you overstocked, where are your risks of stocking out, right? And then second would be to focus on the few decisions that really matter. Clarity, right? So usually, as we all know, Pareto, right? 80-20, so 20% of your SKUs drive 80% of the impact to start there. And like I'm going back to again the fundamentals where I started. Third is that connect demand and inventory, right? So a lot of mistakes happen because forecasting and purchasing is disconnected. So every buyer decision should be tied to expected demand, not just past sales, like you were saying, past spreadsheet, right?
Mhm.
And finally, I would say shorten your feedback loop, right? So you can't plan on a monthly basis. It is, the flow of business. Agent should be able to tell you every day. Again, an agent can work 24/7 for you, right? but it can surface up things in action that matter on a daily basis. So
Right.
that you're able to act proactively and again leverage AI to what we call become the 10x planner, right?
Right.
That's what we call you can become 10x AI as a multiplier.
Absolutely. And this is such a great reminder as well. Just need that
Mhm.
simple, intelligent structure. They are often the best tools that you have to overcome, that you use to overcome the supply chain complexity. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing such great insights and your expertise in such a short amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Maheen. It was brilliant. Thank you.
And listeners, that was Jasneet Kohli from True Gradient, a masterclass on how to leverage AI native planning to optimize your supply chain and scale your retail brand. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. Please be sure to subscribe and visit CanadianSME.ca for more resources. A special shout out to our partners, UPS, Avon Global College, Google, and ADP for their ongoing commitment to empowering small businesses across Canada. Please keep thriving, and we'll see you in the next one.